Hey, that's it.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Okay. Not in a playing mood tonight,
but I am very harmonized though. Like it was nice.
But I am in a mood to talk to our guest today. And today we have T. Caires here, all the way from the Pacific Northwest, but now working for a company kind of in the central states. Or I guess Eastern. I don't know what we call that.
Midwest? Usually it's the Midwest. The American Midwest, which doesn't make any sense because it's more like Mid-East. It's weird.
It's weird.
I don't.
It is weird.
It could be like pointed at a map. It's fine.
There.
That could be a fun game. Can you all find the Mid-East of the U.S.? That would, yeah.
The three of us? I don't know.
No.
Can't find it, so yeah. Yeah. But
so welcome. And let's talk a little bit about why you're here, T. Where do you come from? Where'd you go? Where'd you come from? Cotton IT.
I was hearing that as you were saying that too.
I know.
I could totally hear it in my head.
I should probably get my ukulele out and play it. I don't think I can.
No. Yeah. Well, so I am probably better known in the board gaming world and all that kind of stuff as the One Tar. So that's my handle everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. And I started in the game industry as a YouTuber and Twitter content creator, influencer shenanigans. And it'll be 10 years ago this year. So woo is when I launched my YouTube channel. I've been in gaming. Yeah, I've been a gamer a bit longer, but like working in the industry or doing things in the industry, it's 10 years this year. So it's very exciting. April. And yeah, I did YouTube stuff and I did influence stuff. And I used to do like day in the life vlogs at like major conventions. That's how I kind of really got popular. And then I started doing like freelance marketing stuff behind the scenes for some companies. And then I started working like contract, more marketing, community project management for companies. And then it kind of just like snowballed where I was doing community management on like social media, that kind of stuff, pretty common. And then I was the marketing director at Deepwater Games. And then I was so if you know Welcome To, that's me. Yeah. I brought that over to the US for Deepwater. And then, yeah. And then I also, for several years, was just shy of 3 years, I was the games channel manager at Haba USA for the North American everything. The name was a misnomer. It was Haba North America, but the company was called Haba USA. And then, yeah, so now I own a company.
Hey, that's a big thing.
Yeah, it was a big step. So I went from like running the entire games division for North America and a lot of the English speaking world for Haba, which was really sweet. I ran it for North America. I helped coordinate English speaking other parts of the country like UK, Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
That kind of stuff. And then
did you add extra U's in places like for Canada and Britain and Australia?
No, but I got grief when I didn't. So maybe I should have.
So did Helena.
Yeah, but now I had an opportunity. I stepped away from Haba, and then I had an opportunity to join a team called Snowbright Studio, which is a small indie studio, and to come on as a co-owner / co-founder and start up a tabletop company / division. So I did that. So
you've done that, and we're definitely looking forward to seeing what comes out of it. Before we get in there to that, let's say hi to everybody on the stream. Hey, Amy Bayo, and Andrew Wolf saying woot woot PNW Pacific Northwest represent.
Hey.
Amy's Kickstarter is live right now. Lost for Words. If you like communication games, check out the whole Pink Tiger line where you're talking to friends over something fun and learning about each other. It's wonderful. Helena Capel is here. She says, huge congrats, T. We see Amanda Panda saying hello. Adam Young saying hello. And then Nate saying that the Midwest, it's the Midwest. The middle part of the western part of the eastern part of the U.S.
Makes a lot of sense.
That was a lot of directions in one
there
sentence.
We go. And we have Nicholas Stachia today saying hello, everyone, and glad to catch us live for a bit. Excited to hear from T. Good stuff. So let's actually hear more from T. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
Yeah, we'll continue on.
In the chat, or like you all?
No.
Or like me? Or...
So for sure, people in the chat just ask questions. We'll bring them into the feed. But I'm saying, Alara and Erica, do you have questions for our guest?
Yeah, I suppose it would be useful context setting to get a bit more of the lowdown on the new company. Mm-hmm. What's it about? What's Snowbright about?
Yeah. Oh, Snowbright is about a lot. It's so rough because my business partner and I, when we were discussing like what is it that we wanted from a company that we were running together, we have really big goals, we have really big ambitions, really big like dreams and things that we want to do. And when you write those on an about page, it doesn't sound great. Like it's a little too pie in the sky. So the summary is Snowbright Studio. I'm reading from the website. Snowbright Studio is an LGBTQ+ game studio dedicated to creating unique and heartwarming experiences for people of all ages and backgrounds. Every game we create has a family-friendly love of learning and exploration at its heart. It's very cheesy, I know, but I love it, and I mean every word of it. Another thing that the studio is about, and in addition to that, is we want to make products and games in a way that is responsible in a lot of ways. Environmentally responsible, responsible in regards of engagement with consumers / users, in regards to accessibility and representation, and all of those kinds of things. And then we also want to pay people.
Oh my gosh, what a novel idea.
It's so trippy. We want to pay people for the work that they do. We want to make sure the designers that we're like licensing and working with on games get paid like decent rates. We want to make sure contracts are clear and understanding, and like nobody walks away feeling swindled or like mad, right? Like we want it to make sense. We want to be like, we just want to be nice people. Not to say that there's game companies that aren't nice people. It's just like you hear all these horror stories about these small companies that like come in big and fast and like, I don't know. There's
it's a baseline you want to set from a start. You've already decided your precedent for each things.
You want to set from a relational point of view, right?
Yeah,
it's important.
And it's great to have already been known for things, hopefully good things coming out of the gate. But do you want to tell us a bit about the backstory of Snowbright Studios? Because this is definitely a new chapter, and I think we want to hear a lot about that. But I don't know how many people know this is already an established company that is growing in all these exciting new ways. So can we get a little bit about the story of where that came from?
Yeah, so Snowbright Studio started as a small indie contract for hire studio, primarily focused in the digital game space, focusing on making digital game experiences for the education sector or the government sector. So they've worked with the US government, they've worked with some local state governments, they've worked with universities, and they've worked with AAA gaming studios. They've also worked with university schools, museums. That was it. It's like, awesome, museums. And so they helped them craft and design games for various purposes. So a great example is like a museum, some museums in a quest to modernize or become more relevant for the kids, they try to come up with fun games or digital solutions to help people interact more with the museum. And so Snowbright Studio was a studio that was created to make those kinds of products for those organizations. So like, yes, we will help you make a fun in-museum game for your museum that like teaches kids about the fossils, right? Stuff like that. So that's what Snowbright was doing previously, and none of that was consumer focused. It was all, they were being hired by other organizations, and there's some great products that they've made, but like all of them are either under NDA, or they've been like made for another company that's turning around and saying like, we made this. So
Right.
I can't really talk about it, and that's really typical of like this kind of studio. But a they had a situation where they designed this world for a company, and it's a beautiful, like, cozy cottage core to the extreme world, and it was going to be for this game, and the company was like, sweet, we love it, we're actually just going to cancel the entire project, but
Oh
you can
no.
just keep all of the stuff you made because it's great. And so they were sitting there like,
Now what?
now what do we do? And they had this beautiful world, and they had all this gorgeous art that they had started, and they had these stories, and like just the world building. If you've ever had to build a world for a video game, you know the amount of world building is insane. And so they're like, what do we do with it? And they were like, well, we could make an RPG. So they did. So they made an RPG. They threw it to like into a book. They reformatted it to work in that experience. And then they were like, well, I guess we can put it on Kickstarter and see how well it does. And then it just kind of like did really, really well. Because it turns out people liked the idea of an RPG that had LGBTQ representation and like disability visibility, and also was like a role playing system that has literally no violence in it whatsoever.
Hmm.
So it's
Something nice. Yeah.
yeah, but there's still mystery, and there's still adventure that can happen. You don't need to have murder hobos to succeed in having fun. Turns out. So
Imagine that.
no.
yeah. So that system's called Tea Time Adventures. And I had
Is that the one that actually came with the tea set if you wanted
Yes.
to? I
Yes.
totally remember that.
Yeah.
I considered it for my kids at one point because I'm like, oh, can I get them to play this with me?
Yeah.
You just wanted the piece set.
Yeah.
No,
Wow.
the tea set was too expensive. But I love the idea of it. But I was like, no one's gonna play with me.
Well, I'll play it with you. I haven't actually played it. Yeah, I didn't have anything to do with the creation of that game or Kickstarter, but I did sit down and read the 200 pages cover to cover in a single weekend.
Oh, nice.
Because when I was sitting there debating, like, do I want to join this team? Do I want to
I see. Yeah.
right?
Well, this is them in a book almost, like their last
Yeah.
project, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
And it was great. I was like, this team can make this. And they didn't even like set out to make this. They made this literally by accident. Like,
how do we repurpose what we've got? Yeah, that's it does show a lot of ingenuity. It shows a problem. Like it's you're right. It's a great example of this is why I want to work with you guys.
yes, and the art is gorgeous, and the stories are gorgeous. And I remember talking about that. I remember talking to Grace, my co-founder, actually, or co-owner, business partner, actually wrote a good chunk of the stories. And I messaged them, and I was like, when I finished reading, and I was like, this writing is amazing. Where did you come up with this? I like was drawn into it, and there was a sense of adventure, and I was on the edge of my seat, and I was like really concerned about this and like what was gonna happen. And like there's no violence in it at all, which is not usually, usually people, when they think of nail biting adventure scenes, they think of like, the boss, you're fighting the boss monster and you're on like your last.
It's an anxiety push usually, right? That like hyped up, like why I'm on edge because I'm anxious right now.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just like, this is crazy. Why can you do more of this? Like, so yeah, Grace was like, I write this stuff all the time. I love this kind of thing. So I was like, oh, do you? So
that's wonderful.
Yeah. So they were like, could we do stuff with this? And I was like, yeah, you could do this and this and this. And then they were like, would you like to do that?
With this?
So they sort of reached out to you to see if this is something that you wanted to kind of like get on board with?
Yeah. So it was they reached out just because they wanted to have a chat and just like, hey, we did this thing with this Kickstarter. what do you think we should do next? And I was like, I think you should do these things next. And they were like, are you available to do those things with us?
And you're like, why, yes, I am.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
So,
wonderful.
Yeah.
So one thing that I know that Snowbright stands for is representation, LGBTQ people in the hobby space. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that is going to be kind of like actualized on the tabletop in current products and future products? What's the hopes and dreams?
Yeah. Well, so with the company itself, we have 2 trans founders. So both Grace and I identify as trans non-binary. So that's just part of that is us very loudly existing as business owners is part of what we're doing. We also have employees that identify as trans, and one of the whole make sure you pay people part of our thing is like make sure you provide your employees with healthcare that works for their needs. So it's kind of like a big part as from a company standpoint. From the products that we're making, Tea Time Adventures, perfect example. I don't have the full breakdown of pronouns and gender representation, but throughout the entire story, it's not, oh, there's a lesbian couple. You're reading through the book and you go, wait, is this couple straight? Like it's one of those things where like everybody in the book is so seamlessly every potential gender, sexuality, like ace, like all of everything in the spectrum, but it's all written so subtly is not the right word, but it's just written that way, and it's not like they're
hitting you over the head.
Yeah, like I was reading. My favorite part is when I was sitting down and reading the book, I realized there was a character who had switching pronouns. And I didn't even realize until the 3rd day the character was present in the story flow. And they did an amazing job writing the story where they didn't have to tell you, oh, so-and-so switches their pronouns. I just knew by reading it. It wasn't, pointed out. It wasn't, presented on a plaque or on a name tag. It just was in the narration and it was in the speech patterns. And it was great. So yeah.
It was normalized, right? Through the writing.
It was normalized. It was super normalized. And so with that product, it's ingrained in it, really. And then for future products, excuse me, every product's gonna be different. The product that we're announcing tomorrow, by the way,
hey, scoop.
Yeah, maybe I'll just leak it now. It's about birds.
Birds.
It's not about anthropomorphized birds. It's about real world birds, and so we're not really caring about the gender or the sexuality of the birds. We're just like, oh, it's a bird. So for that game, we're not really doing anything for it, but we are talking about representation in art on future products where we do have humanoid creatures or anthropomorphized creatures or anything that that kind of information is present. Like we had a pitch and we were considering, I don't think this is going to happen, but we were considering a situation where you had a lot of families coming to a location to do things. I think that's vague enough. And so we had a whole meeting about what different kinds of families could come.
Right.
And it wasn't just like, oh, it's a family of 3. This is a family of 2. It was like, oh, this is just a family of like adults who are decided they're all family together.
Right. Like a found family.
Yeah, exactly. And like, this is a family with like the 3 parents and 4 kids or, like whatever. Like it was just
blended
what kind
families.
of, exactly. Like what kind of family representation can we do with just tiles? With the tiles have the families on them.
Right.
So
I read this really cool story today, by the way, which was when 2 single moms bought a house together for their families and they blended their families together. They're not romantically involved, but it made
the support system alone.
Right,
exactly.
Like
just having another person around being like, you saw that, right?
And their backyard
is right now, right?
Kids, and so only one house, only one backyard,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, that would be
And
amazing. Your kids have someone to play with. The
exactly, it
stuffed
was a
each other.
That's
really neat idea. It's
great.
like,
Yeah.
that makes so much sense. Helena Capel asks, she also wants to know what kind of games you are looking for. Like you said, you took a pitch already. What
Mhm.
kind of games would you want to make at
I guess this
Snowbright?
is kind of the where is Snowbright going, and what are
Yeah.
you looking to grow it with?
Yeah, so we're looking for products. We're looking for games that are in the either light to medium strategy wheelhouse. So nothing super heavy, please. The playtime is definitely, we're aiming for like under an hour, by the box. Right now, who knows if we'll go up to 90 minutes, but right now we're looking for under an hour. That kind of light strategy. Uh, Not necessarily hobby game focused, but like everyone can game focus.
Right.
And as far as play styles, we definitely want to support as many player counts as possible. So the standard, 2 to 4 player. But yeah, other than that, it's as long as the game doesn't depend on unsustainable products.
Right.
That's one. So if you're like, well, in this game, you burn every other card when you play, we're just going to be like, no,
Not for us.
we pass.
Mm.
Yeah. So as long as the components you're not like locked into some unsustainable something. So no legacy games, sadly. Also no plastic. So if your game super depends on plastic cards or like see-through transparent cards or dry erase boards, that's a no-go.
Right.
So that's like more specifics on stuff. But that's like an
What are
easy.
your thoughts on dice then?
So you make good wooden dice. They're not like perfectly weighted, but plastic dice aren't perfectly weighted either unless you pay for the really expensive stuff. So
all right, just thought I'd put that out there in case people were like,
Yeah.
"Oh, plastic." I'm like, okay, let's like go talk about plastic
I have these
components.
very nice dice made out of jade. They're small.
Yeah, I don't think those are going in the box.
Oh,
pewter, you can do pewter dice,
wow.
glass dice.
Mm.
You know what? There was some guy. I've seen. I forget what it's. The aircraft grade aluminum dice.
Oh yeah. I've seen he posts all the time.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
I'll just put
Cool.
I'll make a game with those. It will be totally affordable.
100% affordable.
Yeah.
We're
gonna make 5
obsidian dice for Avatar. That's
Oof, yeah.
kind of ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we transitioned very nicely into sustainable tabletop games. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how, not just Snowbright, but you as, T are really kind of getting into this idea, or maybe you were into this idea, but really kind of spearheading some work in the sustainable tabletop area. Because I read your thread today.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So sustainability has been a thing for me. Really in the last like 7 years, I've really dove into it. I follow my other hobby when I'm not watching board game videos is I watch videos from like sustainability focused creators. Levi Saves the World was the old channel name. I think the new channel name is Levi and Leah. And then, oh gosh, there's a few other creators, Alternative Lifestyles, Kirsten Dunstan, I think. Gone with the Winds. There's several YouTube creators in that wheelhouse that I just like love. And it started because the whole zero waste movement, which is kind of just a buzzword, not great. But we adapted it as much as we could in our house, and Portland is extremely eco-friendly.
Yeah.
For example, we do zero waste, or we do minimal waste kitchen purchasing. So I buy most of our food from the bulk sections, with the exception of my goldfish addiction. Sadly, I can't get those in bulk yet. But things like that.
You can't. They're just so delicate.
So I get like a lot of our food comes from a co-op or farmers markets or locally sourced. things. We have a great grocery store that's nearby us. We buy if we buy meat, we buy meat from a butcher, and it's like local, free range. Like the Portlandia episode about the hippies, like that's us now at this point. And so it was kind of funny. Like I had this hobby that is so focused, especially with the whole fear of missing out thing that happens with people buying new games all the time. It's so consumer focused and kind of wasteful, really. Both in packaging and then final product. Like, what do you do with a game that nobody wants? Which is not a conversation people want to have, but it's a reality that happens.
Well, if you're a designer, you turn it into another game. That's what we do.
This is true, but like,
I mean, yeah, we get for
Not
parts,
everybody's a
but what does
designer.
everybody else do, right?
yeah, exactly. So like, for
Alternative
example,
firewood. I don't know.
yeah, well, and so that's the thing. So I'm gonna pick on Ignacy right now because I think he can take it. First Martians, that game, they did a big drive on it, really beautiful game, just flopped. Didn't do well, and they ended up like dumping all the units. They donated them to a bunch of stuff, and then eventually they just did a liquidation sale, and then even the liquidators just got rid of them. There was like photos of like hundreds of them at like a Goodwill in Delaware or something. Like, what's the fate of that product? What's the fate of all the stuff inside that product?
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I think about that, and then I think about like the fact that both my grandparents have died semi-recently, and we had to clean out their houses, and oh my God, the amount of just stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels not great to just be taking loads of stuff to the dump.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there looking at my massive wall of games, and I'm just like, if I were to like just
yeah,
like what happens to these? Like my nieces and nephews will pick through them, but they're not going to take all of these, right? And we can sell them and whatnot, but even that's just gonna happen.
Yeah.
So I started thinking about that a lot. Started caring about that a lot. Haba, my old employer that I was working for, cared about that a ton, and they've cared about it for a long time. So they had really strict business practices around it. And working in an environment that cared that much made me feel and realize it's possible. It's entirely possible to operate responsibly and sustainably on the scale that Haba was at. And so why not just do it smaller? So I also, when I was at Haba, I was asked to join a board of directors. It's secret right now. We'll be announcing sometime soon when we get the website up, that focuses on sustainable practices in tabletop. And it's made up of a variety of industry experts as well as sustainability experts. So we actually have people on the board who do not work in gaming. They work in sustainability. And they're part of the board. They just are hobby gamers. So it's a nice overlap.
They're connected, but they're not part of the industry.
Yeah,
it's really
exactly.
important, right? Just to have that objectivity from the outside.
Yeah, and they know what they're talking about when they talk about waste stream, and like their job, their daily job is dealing with the sustainability and environmental impact of products. So so I joined that, and then when the opportunity at Snowbright happened, one of the things that I was like, has to happen at a company I'm at, is we have to be responsible and mindful of the products we make. And so that means making products with no plastic, making products that have a life cycle that isn't just, it's just going to sit in a landfill for 1,000 years, and make microplastics when it biodegrades. Right? So, that's a big part of what we want to do at Snowbright, and that's a big part of why it's very expensive to make games, and why we will not be making as many games every year as other companies. Yeah. And
fewer SKUs, but higher quality and sustainably done.
Yep. That's the goal. Yeah. And then also, we're going to make sure that all of the games that we make have digital implementations and or integrations in a way that makes sense. So for example, the Birds game that we'll be announcing tomorrow does have score sheets. And while I'm not a huge fan of score sheets do have their place with non-hobby gamers, and also they make the game more approachable for people that don't have a iPhone in their pockets. They make the game playable for those people. So the game will have score sheets. from recycled paper. But we'll also have a score app that'll be free, and it'll be web-based and native on both Android and iPhone.
Nice.
It already exists. I got a beta on my phone. So that's like a really easy thing to do. It was not hard for us to do, and it wasn't hard for us to do because we were a video game studio before. But
Right.
but
Once you build one, it means you can start to piggyback the platform. Like that's something we're working on right now too, to get rid of component parts. Is like, well, there's got to be app versions for certain things, right? Or there's certain components that very easily translate into apps. And now you don't have to have that extra hunk of plastic or whatever it is in the box.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's another part of it. And then also just making digital implementations of the game from the get-go, which is becoming slightly more common, especially with Tabletopia. I know more companies right now, especially because of the pandemic, are making Tabletopia versions of their games. We'll be doing that in addition to making app versions of our games.
Nice.
So yeah, stuff like that.
That's a really nice thing to think about from the
Board Game
sustainability.
Arena is another good one if you can get your betas.
If I had a PHP developer on staff.
Okay, because that's another one that's great for accessibility. I have to say, I introduce a lot of non-gamers to online gaming through Board Game Arena that way.
Yes, that one is much better from that standpoint, and I actually do prefer it as well. I just don't have
Different
a PHP
level.
developer on staff.
Time to upgrade your staff. I don't know. But one of the things I was going to say is that if you can provide that app version, then once that game is, had its lifespan is done in my shelf, like it's just, I didn't sleeve it. I don't like sleeves, and it's worn out. I still have that app version to work on or to play, or the BGA version or Tabletopia version. I think that's a really nice kind of side add-on benefit of the whole idea of sustainability as well, is to make that extra step so that people are like, well, I want to keep this as pristine as possible. It's like, well, you don't really have to. It still exists in digital space. Play it there 20 years later after your thing is like stained and whatnot. Andrew Wolf says native web-based is really smart. Anything to avoid having to post to the app stores. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Amy. Yes. Sorry. Amy is in Portland too. One of our local Portland game stores, CloudCap, has games for rent too. Actually, 4 of the stores in town have games for rent. It's crazy. CloudCap Games has games for rent. I rent from them when I rent. Red Castle Games also has games for rent. Puddletown Games has games for rent. And I believe Rainy Day Games might have games for rent. They had a section. I don't know if they still have it. But
was
games
that like
for
a
rent.
response to the COVID? Or was it just something that people do?
I was curious.
They just did it. In Portland, it was normal. So before COVID, game rentals
commune
was just game rentals were a common thing at the game stores here in Portland. Okay. And then during COVID, a lot of the game stores suspended their game rental programs.
Okay.
But then they brought them back pretty quick. They started doing isolation periods. So they would do 3-day isolation. So you would rent the game for 4 days or 3 days, and then it would isolate for 3 days, and then it would be available again. Yeah. So.
I mean, it's a great way to keep your business going, considering you can't have people come in to play. You may as well have them take the game with them.
It works really well in Portland. I don't know if it would work well at other ones, but all the stores, the cost and the duration is slightly different for every store, but the general formula is you pay $5 for the game and you get it for anywhere from 3 days to 5 days. And then if you bring the game back and then purchase the game at like any point, right? So you bring the game back and then like 4 weeks later you purchase it. If the rental is on your account, you did rent it, you get the $5 off.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a great way to do that.
It's so good. And for legacy games that you can do that with, they do it. So Chronicles of Crime, so perfect for this. Right. Because Chronicles of Crime, once you play through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same with the unlocks.
Yeah.
Any of those legacy games where you don't destroy stuff, it's genius. Yeah.
Pass it along. All the quoted chronicles are like that. Very good.
Mhm.
Amy says that your sustainable buddies in Portland. That's wonderful. You have a new sustainable buddy. I just want to say hi to a couple of other people who joined the feed. Chak Muju, there you are, and Jonathan Harb. How are you doing?
Chak Muju is
mhm.
actually my communications director at Snowbright.
There you go. Hello,
Hello.
to the communication
They were
operator.
their name is Carrie, and she was doing social media planning out, and she was like, "Wait a minute, are you on a podcast tonight?"
Totally.
And I was like,
Totally,
"Oh yeah, I am. Maybe we should mention that."
totally do.
Yeah. So they keep me straight. Carrie is it's great. It's great having a
I
communications
work with
director.
people who are great. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Lovely. So what is next for Snowbright?
The bird game.
Well, other than the bird game.
You heard about that game.
Well, let's do like a 5-year plan. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you see yourself?
Oh my gosh.
This
Well-
tall pie in the sky.
Yeah.
Well, so my brain doesn't work great that way. It's more stepping stones. So this year it's about establishing the brand, getting to know ourselves, getting into Gen Con so we actually can have a booth. My application has been pending for way longer than I would like, and
Yeah.
hotels are open now, and I'm like,
Yeah.
but this year is about establishing the brand as a tabletop company, establishing me at the brand, and that kind of stuff, and then also getting the ball rolling in regards to getting designs in the workflow, because it takes a long time to get a game from design phase to like clicking print. So that's this year. Next year will be similar, but by then we should be established, and it'll be more about scaling up to bigger projects and having a bigger presence in retail. But my goal is, oh man, if I was going to be really honest, like the thing that I really, really want to figure out is kind of the cheap ass games model, where he made game component kits, or not even he made games, and it was like the intellectual property of like, this is how you play the game, and here's the text that you need for the game, and then you just have the components from other things. Like, I would love to figure out something like that, except for tie it into digital, so make it work both ways. That's what I would really love to figure out. I don't know if that model will work, but I'm gonna find out. We're gonna see what we can do and see if we can figure something out to figure out a way to make more interesting or more environmentally mindful gaming experiences using digital and physical in a way that is still engaging. Because there is absolutely something about our monkey brains liking physical components to touch.
Yeah.
Like, we need that. We need that for the experience that board gamers want comes from that. If we were happy without that, we would just all be on consoles, right? Like, we would be talking about the new PS7. I don't know what they're at.
No, but that's good.
I have a PS3
Cool.
downstairs. Does that mean that I'm doing better because it's a lower number? I don't know.
No, it does not.
You guys are okay. This is like totally out of left field, but do you remember there was I think it was when right after the PS2 came out, someone made a spoof ad. It was either PS7 or PS9. It was like, just because they were going so quickly, like they just felt like it was such a jump by that point. There was a spoof back then, and I think it was like the 9 or something like that.
Wow, that's what
That's
we
awesome.
want now. It's the PS9.
That's what I want.
The iPhone model. Like,
Yep.
get one every 3 months.
Right. So, hey T, do you think that it might be possible to like even sell like a kit of parts that maybe
Like a base core set kind of idea? Is
yeah,
what you're
and then
thinking?
use that in every game that Snowbright puts out? Is that something that would work, or do you really want to go like the full on, James Ernst style of here's an envelope of the game parts that we need to print, and then you go and search for pawns and dice and everything else that you need to play the game?
I think that from a approachability standpoint, you do have to have an opportunity. You have to have an option for somebody to just buy what they need from you. The scavenger part of go find a pawn and this is pretty fun. And actually,
sometimes people just want to play.
Yeah. And it's really funny, but like one of the things this is not a Snowbright thing. This is a me personally thing. One of the things that I have been churning over in my head is how can we gamify or make games that use existing games?
So that's pretty meta.
Oh.
So like for example, if
Those
you need
hundreds
6
of
meeples,
boxes. Okay.
yeah, out of like if you're a hobby gamer and you have over 100 games, I'm pretty confident you have something that could work as like you need 6 pieces per player that are unique to that player, right? But yeah.
You're describing how I design games sometimes.
No, the problem is making sure you put things back, because I was bad about that. No, some games don't.
Yes, well, right, and so that becomes maybe there's like a sheet of paper or like a notebook where you take notes about where you steal.
That's just me though.
I just like took a photo, like I do when I'm at a like a big parking lot. Like this is my car. That's the name, number, and letter that I'm at.
That could be a fun legacy component, though. Like in your little list of where you stole parts from each time.
The story of that
game,
part, where it came from, and where it's going.
Yeah,
did it go back in the right box? If it did, it's copacetic.
It's bonus to something else.
Yeah. Oh, Alex White, I like this comment.
If you're gifted the #1 mass market game, here's the solution.
That's genius. That's genius.
Like make everything work with Monopoly?
Yeah. Or Sorry, or like, Risk, or
I do have to say, like one of the very first games that T and I ever played together, I think was Monopoly.
Was it Monopoly or Monopoly Deal? Or
it was Monopoly Deal, but
yeah,
I needed you to say that part. I just wanted people to like gross out at the fact that we play Monopoly. But we play Monopoly.
We're like, where'd you find a time to play Monopoly and not choose something different?
It's Monopoly Deal.
There's nothing wrong with Monopoly necessarily. I'm like, you have that much time.
Yeah, no, it was Gen Con.
Oh, it's Gen Con, you're right.
We were sitting on the floor to get into the early access at Gen Con.
Right, because we had press that year.
And the only game that we had was Monopoly Deal, which Chaz Marler had given me because he had bought it from me in a charity auction.
We give it back to you.
Give it back.
I did not actually realize that history. That's pretty funny stuff.
Yeah, he bought it from me for, I think, like $20 at a charity auction.
Huh?
And then I shipped it to him. And then he brought it to Gen Con to give to me signed.
Did you want his signature?
Chaz. Chaz is fun.
Chaz.
I'm just double checking. Like this is like, or is this?
Yeah. But Monopoly Deal, Chaz was saying Monopoly Deal is a fantastic game. Yes, Andrew. Yeah,
you're not wrong.
Yeah, so Chaz was like, no, but this is like the best and only good version of Monopoly that currently exists. And I was like, okay. And then
facts.
Chaz was like, we're gonna play it, and yeah, so we did.
The rest is history.
Yeah,
it is. Amy Bayo asks, "Are you going to Gamma, T?"
Maybe. Maybe. Oh gosh, in 2020, I was supposed to go to Germany for my mom's spring break, which happened the week after Gamma in 2020. And then COVID lockdowns happened. And so my flight was conveniently canceled, but I got to keep the money from the flight. And in 2021, United was like, you can keep the credit another year. But your credit expires March 2022.
Oh.
Yeah. So we booked flights in October to take my mom on that trip. That trip is supposed to be a 60th birthday present.
Right.
Yeah.
She's no longer 60, but it's fine.
That's what the last 2 years have been.
Yeah. So we booked those flights in October before Omicron existed, or before we knew about it. So I don't know, because Germany is a level 4 do not travel according to the U.S. government. Oh. And if you try to travel into a level 4 do not travel country, it gets interesting. So I don't know. I've spent hours looking at the bureaucratic red tape I have to go through. And I'm willing to do it, but I don't know if my mom is. So the sad joke is, if I'm at Gamma, I failed to get into Germany.
Okay.
Right.
Because the way that it lines up this year, it's one or the other. So if you see me at Gamma, be happy to see me, but also apologize that I didn't get into Germany.
Aw.
Oh, Nicholas is actually in Germany right now, and he says there's a store called T3 in Frankfurt, close to where he is, that does the rental thing where you pay 10% of the game cost to rent it, and if you buy it afterwards, they discount that. That's great. I think that's really wonderful.
Yeah.
And he also mentioned something called the Green Box of Games as an analog system where people can get updates of rules to recombine like the pieces. That's very much like a piece pack. Piece pack has done that for a long time. But I can see that, you know, with different games, better games or other games. Not that piece pack games are particularly bad, but they're very abstract because of the pieces that they use, right? So if you could have something where there is a kit that you could provide maybe new art for, like in a board that you print out or something, that might be interesting to have that kind of sustainable-ish.
Yeah.
So that's a question actually I have to ask you. What do you think about? Erica and I were actually just talking to Matt Dunstan the other day, and we were talking about the Kickstarter they ran for the purely print and play roll and write that they made, and is that more beneficial to the environment to have like 10,000 people printing on their home printers for one piece of paper, two pieces of paper, whatever, or to get a bunch of printers, a bunch of like pads of it stacked up, printed off, put in a box, shrink wrapped, put on a container, shipped around the world multiple times to different stores, and then shipped to the end consumer. What's more sustainable? I don't even know. I wonder though.
So this is the kind of question we actually have had this discussion on the sustainability board that I'm on. And
we're literally jumping all over the place tonight. Sorry.
It's peripherally connected.
Totally.
So this one is there's so many asterisks on this, it's ridiculous. Because one of the things that people don't realize when they have the whole conversation about container ships, right? And producing games, I'm just going to say China, because China gets picked on a lot. One of the things that they talk about is how it's so sustainably bad to print in China because you have to take a container ship of like products across an ocean. When in actuality, container ships are one of the most environmentally friendly transportation methods in the world, because they're boats and they travel on the trade winds. And while they don't have sails, there is a current, and they're not the way that the boats are like, they have set routes that they do around the globe. They are efficient for their size. And when you break down the per unit greenhouse gas emission cost to get a product from China to LA, it is significantly less than to get a product from LA to Denver. Because container ships are more efficient than semi trucks or coal bearing trains or whatnot. And the infrastructure in a lot of countries nowadays for land travel or airplanes, God, like container ships are so much better than airplanes. It's not even worth mentioning, really, because airplanes are basically a joke when it comes to greenhouse gas emission. But that's one of the things that people kind of just conveniently ignore. And it's also significantly more efficient to get product manufactured altogether if you can. It's more efficient to print 10,000 things on one printer than to print on 10,000 different printers. Because when you're printing on 10,000 different printers, the size of those printers are probably small home printers, which are not environmentally efficient in regards to electricity usage. They also, depending on, oh gosh, you could get into the conversation about inks. I don't want to get into the conversation about inks, but if it's an inkjet versus laser versus, you don't know, right? And then when you talk about paper usage, the same thing. You don't know. If you're manufacturing 10,000 units at a factory, and I can say that paper is 100% post-consumer recycled.
Mm-hmm.
The creation of that paper and then the printing on that paper is more sustainable than having 10,000 people buy reams of paper from who knows where and printing them on their printers that use who knows how much electricity. Right? So but you can't do that math.
Right.
Because your printer at home, you're not buying that printer to buy this board game, like to print this one board game.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it's so difficult to compute the environmental impact of those kind of discussions because there's so many considerations to take into effect. Like, are you printing that at your home printer, which uses inkjet, which comes in disposable DRM cartridges that, whatever. We're not going to go into the DRM business on printers. Or are you like going down to the FedEx and printing it on their printers, which are the big printers that like they just run off a sheet and it's not a big deal. And it's toner or whatever, laser or whatever, right? Like, so it's just really, really hard to have those conversations when you talk about scale. What you can talk about is you can talk about what you can do that you can affect, right? Like, if I'm going to print 10,000 units in a factory in China, I can make sure that I know where the paper for those 10,000 units come from.
Right.
And I can make sure I know, like, I send 1,000 units on a container boat to New Zealand / Australia. I send 8,000 to the US. I send another 1,000 to Europe, right? Or whatever distribution. That's better right there than, in theory, on paper, that's better than 10,000 people printing it at home. But we don't know all this stuff about how they got the printers or where they're printing or if they're printing or are they using iPads or
Yeah. So it is difficult, but it's something that I think people will be sort of interested as we talk about the global supply chain, and we talk about even things like, people are talking about, oh, we'll just give you all the STL files and you can print out the pieces in plastic and resin at home. And it's like, oh, that's
3D printers. I hate 3D printers so much. There's certain 3D printers I like, and then the majority of them I hate because hey, everybody.
Sustainability issues?
Yeah, it's, hey, everybody, let's let you all print plastic things for whatever whim and desire you want. So yeah, but it's one of those whole things where 3D printing is fantastic and it has a lot of uses that are super helpful and beneficial in ways that can make great advances in research, with like medical or other areas. And one of the ways that they made 3D printing more affordable for people that would use it for those kind of things is they made 3D printers that could be sold to consumers. They could be mass produced and sold to consumers as kind of a novelty toy. And the making of those printers and selling them as kind of what ends up being a novelty,
like a hobby thing.
Yeah. A hobby thing. That's funding them being able to make these printers more accessible for people that are going to use them for stuff that's going to change the world. So it's always one of those things where it's like, wow, capitalism sucks and it's complicated.
Yeah, complicated. So, you never know who's going to use what for what, right?
Yeah. So that got deep.
Well, it's part of the sustainability talk. There are a lot of layers to consider. It's not a simple conversation, which is why you have all these experts that are joining a panel thing, coming together to have this conversation.
Yeah. And we have Carlos, who's on the Australian government's head of sustainability. He on that team. Oh man, he can tell you some really depressing things.
I don't doubt it. No, it's one of those like, you're gonna make me cry, aren't you?
No, I'm not gonna tell you the depressing things. But Carlos will give a presentation, and you'll just be like,
I hurt. Honestly,
Yeah,
right now.
and then we have somebody who's a marketing expert, and they'll just be like, and so we won't use those slides.
So that doesn't sell.
Yikes! Yeah.
Yeah,
Oof.
yeah. So anyway, it's another reason why with the Snowbright stuff, I'm like, I don't care how much it costs. I'm doing FSC or recycled. Like, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
no plastic. We're good. Thank you. Yeah.
So everybody out there in Meeple Syrup Land, if you have some more questions for T, we've got them here for a couple more minutes. Alara, Erica, do you have more questions?
I feel like I asked a lot, but
What do
I
you
can
think
keep going if you'd like.
what do you think the hardest shift would be for a publisher to move towards sustainable?
I like that. Or
Not necessarily someone that wants to go all the way, but like
Mhm.
they want to be a little better.
Yeah. Well, so there's hard move and then there's easy moves.
Mhm.
One of the hardest moves that you can make is going towards no plastic. One of the things that has happened in the tabletop industry in the last like 4 or 5 years is the value of plastic has become very high to consumers. And it's something that publishers have really leaned into to improve the percepted value of their products by just adding more plastic. Because plastic is cheap. BT dubs. Plastic is very cheap. So when they're like, we'll add this mini for $10 a unit, it's like that mini costs 30 cents. So the sculptor didn't cost 30 cents. The sculptor did cost a lot of money. But either way, moving away from plastic in regards to UV spot coating. UV spot coating is if it's made from a plastic base that is not, if it has plastic in the word, that is poly, any of the poly strains is plastic. It's not recyclable. It's not biodegradable. Also, Google biodegradable versus compostable. There's a reason why certain things say they're biodegradable and not compostable. It's because biodegradable, anybody can say that they're biodegradable because technically everything is biodegradable. There's no regulations, no certifications, nothing that requires you to say biodegradable. Anyway,
Or if you
this is
do it,
biodegradable.
how are they going to prove it? That's not.
Yes. Compostable is actually something that if you say you're compostable, there are definitions and legal definitions as to what compostable means. And so pay attention to that.
So that's the word we should be looking for more is compostable.
It means
Yes.
that they put the time and the effort into
Yes.
actually making it legit.
And it's a product that compostable means that it can degrade into smaller components in a reasonable amount of time and not cause environmental harm by either introducing microplastics or unnatural resources to like soil or whatnot.
Mhm.
So, and that's a legal definition. And it's one of those things where if a company says they're doing something and it's compostable and it's not, they can be sued. It's like a big thing. But biodegradable, there's zero regulation around.
Oh, interesting.
So going plastic is going to be the biggest, hardest step. But there's small steps that you can do to move away from plastic. And also irresponsible deforestation deforestation that you can do in regards to paper usage. There's a paper shortage right now.
Yep.
Not sure how many people are aware of that. The paper shortage is not caused by COVID. The paper shortage is caused by different trade regulations that were happening, stricter governmental regulations in a variety of countries on deforestation, including of the Amazons and old wood forests in Canada. And also forest fires. We've had a lot of forest fires.
A lot of forest fires
that have destroyed millions of acres of wood, and a lot of these forests were mismanaged by governmental forest services because they would let lumber companies manage them and come through and basically deforest sections and then replant them. But the rest of the forest, they weren't actually taking care of. They weren't selectively picking trees because it's too hard. They would just clear cut one area, let it grow back, clear cut another area, and not do any management. And so it's ripe for kindling, global climate, all this other stuff. And so forests have just been burning down. Forests is how you get paper. So finding forests that are FSC certified or PEFC certified wood means that the forests are managed and there's regulations around where that wood and paper comes from. Also using post-consumer recycled paper or even post-consumer recycled plastic. Like
Right.
plastic isn't great in a lot of ways, but you can still have better plastic.
Yeah.
So there's
That
that.
makes sense.
Yeah. So one of the things you can do is if you do have paper products, don't put plastic on them. Even if you can't afford to go FSC or recycled, don't put plastic on your paper products, because as soon as you put plastic on your paper products, it's no longer recyclable, it's no longer biodegradable, well, it's no longer compostable, and it's no longer it's a contaminant. Whenever it hits the landfill, you've ruined that paper forever. And so there are certain finishes that are popular currently that it's just plastic. It's just plastic.
Right.
And it just permanently ruins that paper forever.
That's interesting. Yeah, because we use Spot UV on the box for mine management, and it's like, oh, got to think about that now. It was to a neat effect, but is that effect worth the environmental damage it may cause, right? So these are things we need to think about in terms of being an ethical producer.
Well, and the other thing is looking at the plastic on the card and what that means for the card's end life cycle is a conversation about the end life cycle. The impact of putting that plastic onto the card actually produces thousands of times more microplastics in the water systems than the biodegradation eventually of the card
Right.
itself.
So the making of it is worse
Yes.
than the degrading of it. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So Nicholas Strachka says it's interesting to hear about the use of plastic things, like, because normally we hear like, oh, plastic cards are positive because it makes the game last longer and we won't have to produce as often.
Assuming it's a good enough game that it gets played that length of time, I think
That's
is
part of
really
it,
the
yeah, but
caveat
also
here,
that-
right?
Like T is saying that the production of
Yeah.
that thing itself may not be super environmentally great.
Well, and at the
Right,
same
so-
time, there was this whole big movement for a little while about anti-card sleeves. Here's the thing about sleeves. They're plastic, yes, 100%, but they're just plastic. So
And reusable.
they're reusable, and if they split, if they're made of the right plastic materials, those materials can be recycled.
Mm.
If
Because
the
they're just
card
plastic.
sleeves, yeah, if the card sleeves are just plastic and they're made with the correct film, they are the same type of plastic recyclable as like a plastic bag.
Right.
But if you plastic coat your card, you've ruined the paper and you've made it where we can't get the plastic back out. You can't separate those two things anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the mixing of the medias really that makes it unsustainable. Like you can't get it back once you mix it
Permanently
up.
damaged, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's any of that kind of stuff where you're blending or coating or soaking stuff in. Paint. People talk about moving towards wooden products and wooden cubes, but if you're painting those wooden products or wooden cubes, you're ruining them potentially. Or if you're staining them with non-water soluble stains, you're permanently damaging that wood. So why are you using wood? Like you're turning that wood into plastic. Like
Yeah. It's hard.
So-
This is a hard thing to deal with. And I think that, hopefully we'll see, from Snowbright and from other companies who are doing similar things or trying to do similar things. We'll see like just what does it look like when we're not using, those high gloss acrylic paints to cover up a piece of wood and whatnot. What does it look like with natural wood? How do we get the discrepancy in color that people need to tell whose piece is what, right? Or do we use something else like shapes and sizes?
Well, you can, yeah. Well, and so
do
when it
both.
comes to wooden stuff, there are water soluble stains that
Yeah.
are like Haba uses those in all of their products because all of their products have to be edible to children. It's a weird,
Right.
it's a weird thing, but like all of the game pieces in Haba, you can technically eat.
The more you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's
Just chew
good.
on it.
Yeah, you might not survive, but you can chew on it.
Well,
I
no,
mean,
you'll
wa-
survive.
You'll
It
watch
just
out for
might-
like obstructions.
Yeah.
So-
Just follow the swallowing rules.
Here's
Anyway.
a couple questions. Amy Bayo asks, what kind of price increase do you find with more sustainable cards and boxes?
That's great. Amy, I did a Twitter thread on this partially yesterday. And if China-based manufacturing is what you're looking about, from the quotes that I've gotten in the last 4 weeks, about $1 increase per unit. And that's for a 60-card, 2-piece card game. So to go for FSC and post-consumer recycled paper products, both in the cars and the box, from wherever they get the paper the cheapest, the price difference was $1 a unit.
Right.
So
So if you use the math that we commonly use, you're looking at like a $5 to $7 increase for the consumer.
yes, exactly. Yes.
Unless you want to eat that buck yourself, which is not necessarily what you want, right?
Yeah, no, you shouldn't
Amy
have
also
to.
asks, are there any keywords to look out for to know if you've got plastic on your cards besides spot UV?
Yeah, so a lot of the coatings that are common nowadays are actually a plastic coating, Aqueous coating, or there's an oil-based coating. Old school poker coating is actually a water-based oil, aqueous coating. It's what they used to put on poker cards. It's actually what they still put on a lot of like bicycle cards and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But it fell out of fashion with hobby gaming with the introduction of spot UV and a couple other coatings nowadays. But depending on which manufacturer you're talking to, if you're very strict with the sales manager, and you say no plastic, like, and what's your finish method and what's the chemicals in the finishing, they can get you that information. Anything with poly, anything is plastic. So, yeah.
All right, good to know. All right. Well, you know what? I think that's all the questions that people had. There's a lot.
Well, go check out the Twitter thread because it
Yeah.
sounds like you can continue the conversation over there. If this is, there's maybe like a couple more, if people have more specific questions that they wanted to.
There you
Sounds
go.
like folks
There
there.
is T's Twitter handle, the one tar on Twitter. There you go. And T, what about Snowbright? Does Snowbright have a Twitter?
Yes,
They
they
do.
do. It's S Bright Studio.
S Bright
There you
Studio.
go.
And the website is
snowbrightstudio.com. And sign up for our newsletter, please. We will be sending an email to our newsletter either tomorrow or Friday talking about the Birds game.
Yeah.
That'll be coming to a crowdfunding website probably in April.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and we also are taking pitches. If you are a game designer and you are currently listening to the show, we are taking pitches. You can find the form, I believe, on snowbrightstudio.com. And I mentioned earlier in the podcast what kind of pitches games we're looking for. So that's that. If you are a member of the press, we also have our press sign up list on there.
Very nice.
And if you just want to be on the newsletter, there's a newsletter sign up. So,
do all of those things.
We also have retailer info if you want. If you want to, if you're a retailer and you're interested, we have all the options. So yeah,
communication is very important. All right. So if you'd like to see what I talk about on Twitter, you can see me at Senfeng Lim. Erica, where are you?
I'm at Erica Bouyeris.
Excellent. And Alara?
At TT Void.
Excellent. And you're actually using it more, which is wonderful.
Yes.
That's great. And if you want to just talk to the Meeple Syrup crew, which is, literally just us, it's at Meeple Syrup. And if you want to help us keep the lights on in a sustainable way, hopefully, you can reach us at patreon.com/MeepleSyrup and subscribe for like a monthly small fee, which we will be hopefully using to progress game designers in their chosen field.
Things are opening again.
Things are
possible
again.
again.
We're getting there.
We had plans, guys.
Yeah. Do you have any final advice? You gave out so much, but do you have one piece of final advice that you would give to anybody who is like maybe a designer or maybe thinking about sustainability or any of these things or starting their own company?
Oh gosh, so many things. One of the things that I would recommend is follow the voices in the tabletop gaming community that don't look like you. Actually, I should probably be a little bit more. Follow people and voices in the tabletop gaming community that don't. Yeah, I'm like that don't. Oh goodness, who are different from you? Who are different?
Just sound like a sounding board for your own thoughts.
Yeah. Find people that say stuff that make you uncomfortable. And I don't mean in the slimy, are they fascist way? I mean in the, are they talking about something about how what I'm doing for the planet isn't really great? Follow those people. Or what I'm doing in regards to making this community a safe space for LGBT people or people of mixed races and colors and things, like other races, like follow those people that are having those uncomfortable conversations, and you don't have to like just read what they say.
Mhm.
You know,
You don't have to engage.
you don't have to engage.
Just understand.
Just read and get that understanding, because oftentimes they go viral when they're angry, and so a lot of those people get they get a lot of new followers when they're angry because people like the drama, but what they say when they're currently not in the middle of a drama storm is what's more important and more interesting and more engaging. And Andrew put it really well. Get out of your echo chamber. If everybody that you're in the room with is like, that's a great idea, you're so smart, that's great, get out of the room.
There's danger.
There's danger. Get out of that room. So, just be mindful of that. I have learned so much over the last 10 years in the industry from so many people that I've talked to in the industry. And a lot of the stuff that I've learned has made me uncomfortable. It's made me very uncomfortable, and it made me learn a lot about myself and my past and my history and the decisions I made. I have a therapist to help me with that now, which is great, but it's got me to where I am, and I'm so much happier. And I'm making cool things and working with people that I never thought I would ever work with in a million years, just because I didn't even think about it. So yeah, that's my advice.
All right.
Love it. Let's see who's coming up. Coming soon, we have the aforementioned Amabel Holland from Holland Spiel next week. And so I guess we'll be talking about most likely like print on demand and things like that.
Love Amabel, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Amabel's awesome.
I want to be in the chat for that one. Holy smokes. That's great.
Come on. Come on the chat for sure. And then we will be looking at low player count games on March 2nd as a host panel. So that'll be Alara, myself, and Erica. On March 9th, we have Dr. Lisa Walken and Peter Walken from Bolster Leadership talking about gamification of personal growth and organizational business management and things like that. So it's cool. March 16th, Dr. Scott Nicholson is coming from the Wilfrid Laurier University BGN Lab. We're probably going to be talking about escape rooms and probably about cultural context and puzzle design. So that'll be funny. Hey, Josh Dirksen, you're late, but that's okay. You'll watch it on the feed.
We forgive you.
On March 23rd, we have Mikey Grenier from Which Game First coming on to talk about building community. And on March 30th, we have David Turksey coming at a special time. I'll get that time for y'all later when we get closer. And David is going to talk about designing solo games, which is quite possibly his speciality. So other than that, I think that is it for us.
I'm so bummed. I'm so bummed it's ending. I've had such a great time chatting with you.
I know. So awesome.
I miss hanging out with you.
I know.
I know. It's crazy, but it's like I don't think I've seen you guys in person, and I don't know how long.
It's been a long time. I walked into a room, Erica, and I grabbed a bottle of alcohol, and then I walked out of that room.
What?
You remember that?
No.
You don't remember that?
No, what are we talking about?
That is the last time we physically saw each other.
Oh.
I grabbed that bottle of alcohol from Daryl.
Oh, no, I do not remember this, but sure.
It was at Protospiel. Or not Protospiel, it was at...
Oh, now I remember.
There you go.
Okay.
I'm going to Unpub.
Are you? That's cool.
Are you
I will
going
not, but that's super cool.
I'm only booked for 2 things so far. Because
our next... The only thing that we're booked for is the gathering.
Okay, 3 things. I read because the con's coming up. So I've got but because Gen Con, as you mentioned, all the blocks went up, so we had to jump in. I know I'm booked for Gen Con.
I'm hoping to beg a room off of a friend later if I get booth approval.
I may have an extra space. Just hit me up later.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
I purposely grabbed an extra double. Just
smart. You are smart.
There's always something.
You always did. When I get
wrong.
Gen Con blocks, I always grab an extra for the same reason.
Yeah, somebody else always needs it.
Thank
All
you.
right, everybody. So on that note, and the secret squirrel stuff, we'll say goodbye, and we'll see you next week on the 23rd of February when we have Emma Bell Holland joining us from Holland Spiel. All right, see y'all later.